Quotas enable the regulation and limitation of disk space usage on systems with multiple users. This is useful if you are a system administrator over file servers where large numbers of users must share files on their servers and you need to enforce the sharing of limited space. This is also useful if you are a web host provider and need to enforce disk usage limits on different accounts with different users. On a Linux system, there are soft quota limits and hard quota limits. Soft limits declare how much space a user can use before being warned and having a grace period applied. After this period expires, quotas are enforced. Hard limits are the absolute amount of space a user can use. The user cannot supersede this limitation at all, regardless of the grace period. The grace period is the amount of time allowed for the user to come into compliance with the soft limit. During this period, the user is only warned if she exceeds the soft limit. However, she cannot exceed the hard limit. On a Linux server, quotas are implemented by first installing the required packages, quota and quotatool. Next, you must add the user quota and group quota options to the etc fstab file on the entries where you wish to implement quotas. Then, remount the file system. Next, create the necessary files quota.user and quota.group in root. Then run a quota check to prepare the file system for quotas. Note, for Ubuntu 10.10 and Fedora 14, you will want to log out of TTY7 and onto TTY1 for this step. Next, log back onto TTY7 and turn quotas on with the command quotaon. Finally, edit the quota limits for each user with edquota-u and then the user. First, let's install the packages. Use sudo apt-get install quotatool. Ubuntu 10.10 right now, a Debian flavor of Linux, and we're going to set up quotas in this case. And we need a couple of packages. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to actually install the packages that we need. And so I'm just going to use sudo and apt-get and install. And in this case, the first package I need is quota, and the next package I need is quotatool. Alright, so these two packages. And we'll go ahead and set this up. Edit etc fstab and add the user quota and group quota options. To do this, use sudo nano etc fstab. Okay, now with that installed, the next thing I need to do is actually edit my fstab file. And you can use nano, vi, gedit, whatever you want to do. But notice in this case, who am I? I'm logged in to see Germany, and notice where am I? In this case, I'm in my home folder. So if I go outside of it, I'm not going to have write privileges on things, so I'm going to have to use sudo to get some root privileges. And of course I can do the no-no. I could say sudo su and temporarily become root, but remember that's kind of a no-no, so let's stick to using sudo. And I need to edit the files in the etc folder, in this case the fstab file. Remember we did a tutorial a while back on the fstab file, and that controls the partitions that are mounted automatically on system boot, as well as network shares and things like that. So that's what I'm going to do, and the particular text editor I will use is nano. Sudo etc, sudo nano etc, and then I want to do fstab, and then I just want to add an entry right here where my UUID is for my ext4 partition. Okay, and if I look at this, I want to put it right here after this. And by the way, this is just, let me pull this out so it's all on one line, because that might be confusing, or that might look confusing to you. Alright, so if that helps a little bit. There. Let me pull it up just a little bit more there. Okay. Hopefully that helps make it a little less confusing. So it's all in one line. In this case, I just want to postfix or end the arrows equals remount dash ro with a comma. And I'm going to add two entries here. One for users, one for group. And it's going to be usr quota for the user and grp quota for the group. And I don't have to end the last one with a comma there, but I just want those two entries. That's really all I have to do to the fstab file. So I'm going to save it, and in nano that would be Control X to exit, Y yes to save, and then enter. As long as you did that with sudo root privileges, you should have no problems and no issues there. Now go to root and create the quota.user and quota.group files. To do this, use sudo touch quota.user quota.group. Now the next thing I need to do is go over to root, and I need to make a few empty files. There's a couple of ways to do this. You could use the touch command to make some empty text files. You could use the -c option with quota check, and that would implement, you actually create those files and things. But I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So sudo touch, and the files that I need to make are quota user and quota group. And I can put them all in one line if I separate them by a space. So quota dot user and quota dot group, or grp here. Oops, excuse me. Quota dot user and quota dot group there. Okay, and if I do a long listing, next tighten up your permissions on the quota files. To do this, use sudo chmod 600 quota. Notice my permissions here by default. I have read permission, and there's nothing really wrong with that. I mean, we're not given group write permission or anything to modify their quota entries. But let's say for one reason or another you didn't want users to be able to read those files and know the quota, limitations or capacities of other coworkers and things like that. For some reason or another, it's common sometimes to just chmod that 600 such that root would have read write, but the other in the group would have no permissions. And so if I do that, sudo chmod 600, then I can just do a quota with an asterisk, because there's only 2 files in the whole root directory right now that start with quota. Alright, so and that would effectively take care of this permission. So we installed the 2 packages, quota tools. We edited the fstab file and added user quota and group quota to it. We saved it, and now we've added these 2 empty text files and modified permissions on them. So we're almost ready to go here. Now remount the file system with your new quota settings. Use sudo mount-o remount, and for root, the root file system, use root. Now the next thing we want to do actually is unmount and remount the file system with those new settings in place. And so let me go ahead and clear the screen here, and I'm just going to do sudo, and I'm going to use the mount command, pass in -o an option, and I want to remount. I'm just going to do the root partition in this case. Alright, so I did that, and let me look at my mount settings now. If I type in mount, notice now that root, the ext4 partition, is now mounted with user quota and group quota. So it's now mounted with the settings there. Run quota check to prepare the file system. Note, if in Ubuntu 10.10 or Fedora 14, you may need to log out of TTY7 and log into TTY1 to perform the next step to avoid issues. To do this, use Control, Alt, and then press F1 to go to TTY1. When you're done, use Control, Alt, and press F7 to go back to TTY7. The next thing I need to do is run quota check, and that's to kind of go through my file system and set it up or prepare it to implement quotas so that I can limit directory usage on a per user basis. And here's where I've had some issues, and it depends on the flavor of Linux you're on. You might be able to stay at TTY7 and do everything from the same prompt, but to be on the safe side, on some versions I've noticed I had to go to TTY1 to avoid lock files and permission problems and just really weird errors and things. It seems a bit buggy in the latest versions of Fedora 14 and Ubuntu 10.10. So just to avoid any of those possibilities, let's jump on over to TTY1, the first terminal. And by the way, if we haven't really talked about that yet, but there are basically 7 TTYs or terminals that you can have on any Linux installation, be it Debian or be it Red Hat. And if you do Control Alt and hit a function keys F1 through F7, you can go to those different terminals. So to do this, I'm going to log out right here. And I'm just going to go ahead here and I'm going to log out. And now I'm going to do my function keys and hop on over to TTY1. And now I'm going to log in, see Germany, and my password. Alright. And next, prepare the file system with quota check. To do that, use sudo quota check -mavg. Here's what those options mean. The lowercase m means don't try to remount the file system. This is generally the safer option. The opposite or inverse of that is the capital M, which means try to remount the file system. But this can be bad. If you're scanning the file system and changes are being made to a file, it can corrupt the file system, necessitating the use of fsck to repair the file system. Therefore, the more general and more frequently used option is lowercase m. The lowercase a means all files that the system has mounted in the etc mtab file. When you type the mount command, that's what you get with etc mtab. V would be verbose, in other words, display extra information. Otherwise, it would typically run in the background and hide that information. U is only user quotas listed in the etc mtab file, and G is only group quotas listed in the etc mtab file. Up here, again, to prepare my file system, I want to do quota check, and I'm going to need some root privileges, so I will need to run that with sudo. I'm just going to do quota check. And there's lots of options, which we'll go over later, switches and things you can pass in. But the one that you want, or the combination of switches and options, is AVUGM. Or if you want to remember it as a mnemonic device, you could just say mavug. And, okay. Turn quotas on with quotaon. Use sudo quotaon-avug. Here's what those options mean. Lowercase a means all file systems in the etc fstab file with quotas enabled. Lowercase v means verbose, in other words, display extra information. Lowercase u means manipulate user quotas, and lowercase g means manipulate group quotas. Okay, in this case, I'm done running quota check, and everything's ready for implementing quotas now. And if I want, I can jump back over to my next terminal. But let's look at two more commands real quick before I do this. And the first one is quota on. This will turn quotas on. In this case, for my whole root folder here, root drive. And again, the extensions would be AVUG. Alright, in this case everything's okay, quotas are turned on. And then if I wanted to turn quotas off, sudo, and then quota off, and the same extensions AVUG in this case. Alright, so I'm going to hop back on over to TTY7 and log back in, get my X Windows, my GNOME graphical desktop. And we're going to go set up some quota configuration files.